As always, today's video does contain content that some viewers may find sensitive, and as such, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you want to send my way, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to submit your story. And of course, thank you. When I was 16 to 17, female, I worked at a small, family-owned bakery. This bakery has been in my town for 50 plus years, and has been owned by the current owners for over 20. Since the bakery has been there so long, we had a lot of regular customers, and the owner's friends coming in on a regular basis. There was this elderly couple that came in for the first couple of months that I worked there, and they were so sweet. So I would strike up conversation with them, since they could come in first thing in the morning when we weren't busy. One day, they brought in their grandson, 27 to 28 male, and I made my usual conversation. After that day, the grandson would come in almost every single day, usually without his grandparents. At first, I just thought that it was lonely and he was close with our owner's son, so I didn't think anything of it. Then, he started to get creepy. He asked me how old I was. I was 16 at the time, but I'm tall and looked generally older. So I told him. And he responded that that was too bad. I didn't look 16 and was then asking when my birthday was and when I would turn 18. He asked what high school I went to, and I couldn't lie because he knew I lived in the area. He kept making comments about how nice my body was, how pretty I am, telling me he hasn't ever seen anyone who's looked like me, and that he was fascinated by my looks. When I wore skirts or tops that were tight, he would comment on how short my skirt was, or how my top fit perfectly and how it flattered me. I started to get creeped out after a couple of days of these questions and comments, so I told my coworker, who was a couple of years older than me, and she said that she would try to distract him so I didn't have to deal with him. The next day, I came into work and my coworker served him, and I thought I was gonna get away. This was on a weekend at the bakery, which was very busy. I only got 2 breaks a day, and so I used them wisely and usually watched Netflix or listened to music. So there I am with my headphones in, on my break. He comes and sits down next to me and starts striking up conversation. During this conversation, I mentioned that I had a boyfriend, and then he asked to see pictures of him and I, and asked if he was a good guy. And then it progressed to him asking if he satisfies me. I was very uncomfortable, so I was hardly giving him responses, but he still stayed until the end of my break. This pattern continued for a while. He knew my name, so he found my Instagram and would reply to all of my stories, comment on all my posts, and DM me random things like memes and send me my own posts saying how nice my face looked, my body, etc. I started to ignore his DMs, so he would delete what he sent and then ask me when he saw me next why I didn't reply. A while later, I broke up with my boyfriend, and so I deleted my post with him, and the creepy guy noticed within the same day. He saw me at work and was asking me what I was doing this weekend, if I had plans. I said I did and I brushed it off, but he kept saying how he has tickets for some fair that was going on in our city and how he had no one to go with. At this point, I felt like there was nothing I could do because his family was very close with the owner, but I finally worked up the courage and told the owner's daughter. She was very surprised, as she'd known this guy his whole life, and she said that she would speak to him about boundaries and how he should keep his distance from me, but she wouldn't ban him from the store. A couple of days later, he comes in again and completely ignores me, and then keeps staring at me from across the store, looking angry. He did this until he was about to leave, and then asked why I had told my boss that he made me uncomfortable. I told him that I was 17 at this point, and he was 10 years older than me, and that I didn't appreciate the comments. He said he didn't see a problem because he didn't make a move until my boyfriend and I had broken up. I was honestly really scared, and it just so happened that I was thinking of quitting because school was a lot, and I was getting ready to go to university. That comment just completely put me off, so I quit the next day because the timing was right anyway. I blocked his social media, and every so often I get random accounts that all have a variation of the same username, and I block them too. Luckily, I haven't had any encounters, as I haven't gone back to that job since I quit. The last situation that happened with him actually happened last week. My grandparents would go to this bakery before I even worked there to get a dessert that they liked. They called me, and we were just catching up, and they mentioned that they went to my old job and how the owner and his children and another guy in his 20s she hasn't seen before said hi. I asked her who the man was, as I thought he might have been a regular customer or something. After talking it over with her, it was obvious it was the same creepy guy. I told her all the stories, and she mentioned that he says he hopes I'm having a good time at X university. I live in a different city, hours away, for school, and I never told anybody at that job where I was going. I don't have it on my social medias either, so I have no idea how he would know where I go to school. Every so often, those accounts do pop up, but since I'm hours away from my home city, I think I'm in the clear for now. I hope that I don't ever have to encounter him again. Hi, so this happened about 15 years ago when I was 18. I used to work in a newsagents/cafe franchise in a large mall. We got a lot of creeps for some reason, to the point that all of us girls stopped wearing makeup and tried to have the worst hairstyles that we could, to make us as unappealing as possible. So, you can imagine the extent of the issue. I've always looked younger. I had to show my ID to buy alcohol until I was 30, so with no makeup, I probably looked about 15. One day, a creepy dad comes in with a son. The dad is over 50, huge, bald, dressed all in leather, biker style, and the son is about my age, and he looks like a stereotypical nerd. Thin, tall, glasses, looking at his feet. At first, the dad asks to buy a bus ticket. I checked the drawer, which was pretty low, and I had to bend to look in it, which is important, for the bus tickets, but I don't see any. So I ask a coworker to go check if there are any more in the back. She comes back and says that we're out. So I say, "I'm sorry, sir, we don't have any tickets at the moment." And here's where the creepiness begins. Him? Oh, that's a shame. Could you maybe look in the drawer again? You look so pretty when you bend over. I'm a bit shocked, but I just say that I'm sure we don't have any left, sir. I can see him looking at our cigarette shelf, which goes all the way up to the ceiling. He makes a smug face, and then says that he wants Marlboros. They're at the very top, and I would have to get on a ladder to get them, but for that very reason we had a box of the cigarettes from top shelves under the counter, So I make a smug face too and pull the Marlboros from there. Then he says, "Oh no, I was hoping you'd get on the ladder and I'd have a better look at you." Me, trying very hard not to just yell "screw off." "Well, I have them here, so no need for the ladder." Him, "That's a shame. Huh, what's that pendant you have here?" Well, basically shoving his face into my cleavage. I jumped back, of course. I was really uncomfortable at this point. I now know that the easiest way out of it would be to just ask a male colleague to take over, but it was my first job and I didn't know any better. So I didn't say anything and was just quickly packing his stupid cigarettes so I could get rid of him ASAP. In the meantime, his poor son, visibly embarrassed, pulled his sleeve once every so often and went, "Dad, can we please just go?" But the dad didn't react to that at all. I mean, total silence. Didn't even look at him. Finally, the cigs are packed. I tell him his total, and as he's paying, he goes, "What time do you get off work tonight, honey?" With a sleazy smile. The son is completely red in his face and just keeps repeating, "Dad, let's just go." To no avail, of course. At this moment, something finally clicked in my brain, and I remembered an interview with a beauty pageant contestant. You read a lot of BS magazines working in a place like that, who said her best way to blow off old creeps is to make them feel, well, old. So I smiled my most beautiful smile and said with a sweet, giggly voice, "Oh, sir, I think you're even older than my daddy." Well, that did it. He got red, grabbed the son, and literally stormed out, dragging the kid behind him. He even left his cigs, so a silver lining there because I'm a smoker, and since they were paid for, and he didn't come back for them, my boss let me take them. Still, it was really creepy, and I'm actually uncomfortable thinking about it even after these 15 years. I'm also sorry for the kid. He seemed nice, and I can't imagine the embarrassment I'd feel if my dad was hitting on and harassing girls my age. I want to preface this story by saying that this one was submitted to me a long time ago by somebody, and I honestly have no idea if I ever used it. I think it ended up getting lost in the mix of stories somehow, and I just didn't realize it was there, so I'm very sorry to Amy, the person who submitted this, and I hope that if I didn't use it, I hope that that didn't dissuade you from listening to my channel. Just know that it was there, I just apparently missed it or didn't realize it was. And if I did use it, well, I'm using it again. And hopefully you all can still enjoy the story, because it's a good one. It should be in the video, absolutely. So, here we go. My name is Amy, and for privacy reasons, I'll keep out my exact location where this story took place. I grew up in a smaller suburban town in a Midwestern state. The story is not very horror movie scary or bone-chilling, but more so very creepy, real-life scary. The neighborhood that my family and I lived in seemed safe enough up until a flow of crimes against children were happening. At one point, a young girl on our block was snatched out of her bedroom window and assaulted right on her front lawn. After that, my parents were extra cautious about where my sister and I were playing. I remember one instance where I was in our front yard with my father, who was doing some yard work, and I saw a white unmarked van driving slowly around the block with the back sliding door wide open. Once my parents had spotted this, they no longer allowed my younger sister and me to play in our front yard, and I believe they even notified the police of that suspicious van. Moving on, this particular incident happened after a year or two after these scary and creepy occurrences had been happening. I believe I was around 11 or 12, and my sister was just 2 years younger than me. One evening during our summer break, my sister and I wanted to get out of the house and ride our bikes. My mom was at work, and my dad was home, and was usually fine with us going out as long as we stayed close in the neighborhood and stuck together. My parents had drilled in our heads the warnings of strangers and what to do should we ever encounter anyone. So, my dad let us take our bikes and bike around the playground at our school, which was no more than 2 blocks away from our house. Before we pedaled to the playground/park, my sister and I liked to ride our bikes around the parking lot of the ice arena, which was just a block up from our home. The ice arena had a large parking lot, which made it fun for cruising your bike around. As we were doing circles around the building, which was deserted, I noticed a tan minivan pull into the parking lot and park in one of the spaces. I didn't pay much attention right away, and my sister and I continued to cruise our bikes around the building, enjoying the summer breeze. Each time we passed that section of the parking lot, I saw the van that was just parked there, and the driver of the van had not exited his vehicle. I caught up to my sister and stated that it was odd the man in that van was just sitting there and appeared to be watching us ride around the parking lot. My sister agreed, and we decided to leave the area and pedal towards the school playground, which was not far from the arena. As we pedaled away from the parking lot, I looked back and saw the van was still parked and didn't follow us. I felt a little more relieved, and we eventually got to the playground. Neither my sister or I felt like playing on the playground, but I just wanted to ride our bikes around the school building and through the blacktop and playground areas. As we rounded one corner of the school, I noticed the same tan minivan cruising up the street. My red flags started going up, and I told my sister the same van that had been parked at the arena was now driving towards the school. My sister didn't seem to mind, however, and stated that she thought we would be safe since there was 1 or 2 other kids playing on the playground. Still, I felt a bit uneasy, and began to keep my eyes more alert to the van. After circling the school building a few more times, we noticed that the remaining kids at the playground had left. The sun was starting to dip into the sky, which was our dad's rule, that we had to head for home around that time. I didn't see the van anywhere in the last few minutes, and just decided we were okay. But as soon as we started riding through the school parking lot, we saw the van again. It was parked up the small, short hill that led up the school parking lot entrance. My sister and I veered our bikes onto the opposite side to avoid riding close past the van, but the driver of the van suddenly stuck his arm out the window and tried waving for us to slow down. We slowed our pace, but it did not stop completely next to the van. The driver then stuck his head out the window and said, "Hey, can you two please stop for a second? I need your help." We braked a few feet from the van, unsure of what to do. The man smiled, but had a concerned look on his face. He said, "Sorry to bother you two girls, but I've been driving around because I lost my dog. I'm sure you saw me drive around earlier because I live in this neighborhood, and I was out looking for him. He's a golden retriever and goes by the name of Buster. Would you two be willing to come with me to help find him?" My sister and I both exchanged nervous looks, and me, being the braver one, stated we had to get home as our father was waiting for us. The stranger looked disappointed and said again that he couldn't stop thinking about his dog and how much he's worried about him being left out all by himself and how we could really use our help. He also added that his dog loves kids, so If he heard or saw a kid calling out to him, he might be more willing to come back. My sister, being the more trusting one, started to get a sympathetic look on her face and began to walk her bike closer to the van. I grabbed her arm and tugged her back. Just the way this man looked and smiled at us made my skin crawl. I knew even at such a young age that this man was not being truthful. I nudged my sister and said that we needed to leave now. We began to pedal away and down the road. The stranger did not say anything more and started his car and did a quick U-turn and then sped off in the opposite direction. We pedaled home and we kept looking behind and around us to make sure that he wasn't following. When we reached our house, we ran in to tell our dad, who contacted the police. The next day, we were playing with my childhood friend, Alex, and his sister Sarah, who was a couple years older than Alex and I, and we shared with them the creepy experience with the man in the van. Sarah got a strange look on her face and said that she and her friend Diane were going on a walk in the same neighborhood last night when a man in a tan van drove up to them. He had told them the same story, how he had lost his dog and how he needed help from kids to find him. Only this time, Sarah's friend had walked up to the van and just close enough to see that the man was not wearing any pants. Sarah said Diane screamed and they ran in the opposite direction of the van. The man sped off and they made it safely to Sarah and Alex's house, where they informed their mother and she dialed the police. As Sarah was telling me this, I remember feeling incredibly scared and relieved at the same time, how my sister and I could have been victims of kidnapping. Or worse. I was relieved that Sarah and her friend weren't hurt too, and that our parents had been diligent in warning us to be wary of strangers. So, even though this story doesn't have an incredibly bad ending, and it's not that scary, it is more so just a good lesson. If you have kids, this goes without saying, but please warn them about strangers and how to avoid a dangerous situation, much like the ones that my sister, Sarah, and Diane, and myself were all involved in. As a parent now myself, it scares me to think that something like this could happen to my own child. So, please take this story as a good lesson, and just be careful. A few years ago, I, 26 female, used to work at a job where I usually wouldn't get off until around 11 p.m. I didn't mind it for the most part. I'm a night owl by nature, but I read a lot of Let's Not Meet, and I watch a lot of horror movies. I wouldn't say that I'm paranoid, but I'm definitely cautious. This one particular night, I was driving home along one of the main roads. It was late enough that traffic was fairly scarce, but not so late that I felt like I was the only one out. Especially because there had been a Jeep behind me for a good while at that point. When it came time for me to make my first turn, the Jeep followed. This wasn't particularly unusual. I was still on a big road, so I didn't think anything of it. I needed to get gas, and luckily there was a fairly busy and well-lit station on my way home. I feel like the layout is important, so bear with me. From the road I was on, you had to turn left onto a side street, and then turn right onto a street that runs parallel with the grocery store, and then turn right again to get into the gas station. It's a very specific destination, and there's no through traffic. When I went to make the first left, the Jeep got into the turn lane with me. This is when I started paying attention. They'd already been behind me for a good 10 to 15 minutes, and it seemed unlikely that they were just coincidentally going to the same gas station as me, considering how many there were in that area. But, like I said, there's also a grocery store that's open 24 hours, so I thought maybe that's where they were going. However, they still followed after me when I turned into the gas station. I pulled up to one of the pumps in the middle lane, put my car in park, and watched the Jeep in my rear view. There was no way in hell I was getting out of my car until I figured out what they were doing. If they pulled up to a pump and started getting gas, I would just laugh at myself and carry on. They didn't pull up to a pump. They lurked at the back of the lot, just idling in place for close to a minute. Finally, they started slowly driving around the far end of the pumps until they stopped again in front of my car, maybe 15 feet away. Unfortunately, they had tinted windows, so I couldn't see who was in the car or what they were doing, but after another brief period of time, they just drove off. I got gas and drove home, keeping an eye out, but I didn't see them again. Edit. I just realized something that honestly made me sick to my stomach. If I hadn't decided to get gas that night, and if they were, in fact, following me, my next turn would have taken me into a very large, very dark, and very empty park. It takes almost 5 minutes to drive through, and it has a million speed bumps, so there isn't any quick escape. I hate thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't stopped. Yikes. Maybe this doesn't count as creepy and I'm reading into it too much, but I still think it's weird, and it really freaked me out at the time. I have no idea what they were doing. Were they following me? Was it just a coincidence after all? I'll never know for sure, but thanks. I hated it. For better understanding, this happened in the mid-90s, and there was very little adult supervision. The summer when I was 9, there were 4 attempts to kidnap me. 2 guys each tried twice. I'll start with the mailman. In June, I was spending a weekend at my dad's apartment building, and his other kids and I were out in the little playground area when I noticed someone staring at me. It was the mail carrier at the outdoor block of resident mailboxes. He glanced around, and when he saw me looking at him, and then walked up. Now, I already didn't trust adults, so my first instinct was to step toward him to keep my little half-brothers behind me, but he just kept looking around and then said, "Hey, want to see my truck? It's really cool. Come on." I refused, and I waited for him to leave, but he just glared at me and kept telling me how great mail trucks were and how much I have to see it. I had no idea how to get us away from him, but luckily a woman with her own kid came over and he just stomped off. When I told my dad, he rolled his eyes at me and said that I must have misunderstood. I think it was pretty clear. About a month later, back at my mom's house across town, I was walking down the block to visit a friend, and, at her mailbox, I glanced over and it's the same guy. He seemed as surprised as I was, and we both just froze and stared at each other. He snapped out of it before me and did his sketchy looking all around thing. Then just started to reach for me. I bolted. I'm pretty sure I was up the driveway and into my friend's house in under a second. Now for the worst guy. Again, in June, before my first encounter with the creepy mailman, a friend and I were sitting on the curb in front of her house, trying in absolute vain to think of something fun to do. We were deep in shooting down each other's half-assed ideas when a big, old, noisy car pulled up next to us. The driver rolled down his window and just went, "Come here." I was horrified when my friend started to get up. I jumped up too and grabbed her hand, but had no idea what to do. The driver said that he had something for us, and my friend pulled away to move toward the car. I tried to grab her again, but before I could really do anything, some steady traffic started down the street, and the guy just threw something out of the window and drove away. It was pictures. I didn't want to tell my parents for fear of somehow being blamed. My then stepdad was literal garbage and could have found a way to make having those junk pics my fault. But I trusted her parents enough to tell them. Her dad asked about the guy in the car, but neither of us could give any useful information, so I didn't think anything would come of it. In August, after both mailman events, I was much more careful but still walked around my neighborhood alone. This time, near the corner of my block, I noticed a car slowing down and I recognized it. I started speed walking to get away, but the junk pic pervert sped up a bit and rolled down the window. The words, "Alone today?" still kind of haunt me. I kept up my almost running walk and stared ahead, but he pushed the passenger door open and just yelled, "Get in!" I was off. With my traumatic summer, I had made plans. To get away, I started cutting through yards and down the tiny alley behind my block. At my locked gate, I scrambled up the chain link fence and tore through the backyard and into the house. Honestly, I'm still kind of proud of managing that. For the next few years, I didn't leave my yard alone, and to this day, if anyone seriously scares me, I swing on them. Rough summer. I'd been with my fiancé for 2 years at the time, known him around 4 or 5, and had a year of no contact in there. In early 2020, there was one point where he threw a giant piece of Lexan, plastic trophy case covering, down the hall after he had stubbed his toe, which should have been a huge red flag. Then, in early October of 2020, one of the first things I wake up to was my now ex-fiancé on the phone with a friend, stating that I basically wasn't going to clean our cat litter. He's really allergic to the ammonia. He was complaining that we couldn't afford any new litter, which wasn't the truth. It's just that he overspent on a lot of remote-controlled trucks and cars from his work. That was a hobby, and it became obsessive. For more context, my kitchen has a hallway, and then a wall, and then a gap for an entrance for the kitchen, and then another small wall that has a glass cabinet right there. There's basically a small nook that has a kitchen table and cabinet right before the entrance to the kitchen. So I came out of the bedroom and told him to take our dog outside to pee, and that I would clean the cat litter right now. Take some responsibility. I saw that he was soldering LED lights onto the bottom of one of the RC cars, so I was just cleaning up a bit of dishes and small scraps of paper, recycling, etc. from the living room and the kitchen, while telling him it was rude of him to say that I was not going to clean for 15 days when I could just do it right now as he takes the dog outside. He then proceeds to speak the words, "Do you not see what I'm working with? Do you want me to burn you?" And actually started stabbing the air. I got very upset. I unplugged the soldering iron and said, "Take the damn dog out that you do absolutely nothing with, and I'll clean the litter right now. How dare you? What the hell?" And as I was walking out of the entrance to the kitchen, he ended up shoving me against the wall with the glass cabinet. So I was kind of in between a cabinet and a wall, and he shoved me against the wall. My head hit the wall, and he grabbed my clothes so hard that he was practically grabbing my skin. Then, he just sat back down and continued soldering. I was so upset that had even happened to me. I literally told him I have PTSD from the father of my child, and now it was him doing it to me, that I flung a couple of the RC cars that were right beside the cabinet on a plastic shelf unit, and then proceeded to yell at him to get out. Then he said, "Huh, we're smashing stuff now," and picked up the heaviest RC and threw it at my glass cabinet. But I was right there and I caught it in the air. It cut open my hand and knee really bad that I needed stitches, that I ended up not getting due to embarrassment. I thought it was better than glass being everywhere from my mother's broken cabinet that she'd given me. 4 months later, I kicked him out, because he was way too rough on our dog because she had had an accident. What a pathetic piece of human flesh. My sister, we'll call her Kay, and I always remind each other of this particular event from our middle school days, on and off. It's something that has truly stuck with us all of these years. It's summer 2012 in a small town in South Carolina. My sister and I have our 2 friends staying the night, Angel and Carmen. Fake names, of course. The night started as usual, as any middle school girl sleepover. Little did we know, the decisions we made in the following hours were going to scar us for years to come. My sister and I lived alone with our grandmother, roughly 2 miles from the town. At some point after my grandmother had went to sleep, we, meaning Kay, Angel, and Carmen, and I hatched an idea to walk ourselves to town to have a midnight stroll. More like 1 to 2 a.m. So, sure enough, we toughened it out for 2 miles, and found ourselves walking the back streets neighborhood behind the train tracks that separated us from the main road. We were walking side by side, with me on the far right closest to the houses, Angel and Carmen smushed between me and Kay on the far left. As we're walking and carrying on our conversation, something in my brain told me I needed to look into the yard on my right. I turned to look in that direction, and immediately jumped back, finding myself next to my sister Kay, and shout, "What the hell?" Everyone's asking me what's going on, as I'm telling them to look. They look over to see a man well over 6 foot, partially hidden behind a tree cloaked by darkness. At this point, he's now coming toward us at a slow but determined pace. We absolutely take off running to the end of the street. I'm looking behind me while running the entire time, and he was indeed chasing us now. Thankfully, everybody but him had the same idea to jump the train tracks and head over to the slightly more busy but still completely dead main road and regroup. After looking around and making sure he didn't follow us, we steadily made haste 2 miles back to our grandmother's house. I remember checking our surroundings the entire way home, and being as quiet as possible so as to not draw attention. We got back around 4 a.m., sat in silence for a bit, and then went to sleep. We never told a soul what happened that night. So this was today's collection of Creepy Encounter and Stalker stories. And hopefully it was a collection that you enjoyed and can appreciate. And hopefully it's a collection that you can listen to and kind of maybe, not really learn a lesson, but use them as cautionary tales. Things can go wrong at a moment's notice with people, and it's best to be cautious. I'm not saying live your life paranoid at all. I'm saying be careful. Not everyone has your best interest at heart, and I think that is obvious by the fact that there are always stories like this to tell. So, a huge thank you to everyone who submitted their stories, as well as those on Reddit who allowed me to use their tales in this video and every video that I create. And a huge thank you to you for listening to this point. If you did listen to this point, please consider hitting that thumbs up button. That would be greatly appreciated. You can also subscribe to the channel if you're new, and leave me a comment letting me know how the weather is there today. I would love to know. The weather here today is sunny, but not exactly warm. I think it's supposed to be in the high 60s, though, so that'll be nice. Yeah. Anyways, friends, I hope you have a beautiful day. I hope I see you on the next video. And of course, until then, and every day after that, and prior to this, I hope that you sleep well.